Hey, what's going on everyone? Justin here, and in this video I want to share the 5 best medieval history books that I finished in 2024. Now, I've already done a ancient history version of this kind of video, so if you're more into that kind of thing, definitely check that one out. I've also done my favorite nature reads of last year as well. And then we've got philosophy, modern history, and general science coming up down the pipeline. And I got to thinking, I'm doing the medieval history one. It looks a little different in the background here. I've been slowly kind of reorganizing my shelves and stuff, and I'm onto the medieval history section, which is actually kind of at the bottom 3 shelves here. So anyways, I was like, I should do my favorites from this time period. So I have 3 kind of honorable mentions that all have a little bit of a caveat to them. And then I have 2 that are just, heads and shoulders, like the best ones for the year. So let's just go ahead and get started. So first up, we have Medieval Maritime Warfare by Charles Stanton. And this is all about anything you'd ever want to know about naval warfare from between like 500 and 1500, roughly those time periods. The reason I'm putting it more in the honorable mention is don't let the size of this book fool you. It's about 300 pages of text, but the font is actually pretty small. I feel like the gutters and margins are pretty small for whatever reason. It just is very dense, and the fact that it's just information after information after information. There's not like a lot of like narrative chronology per se, in the sense it's not I guess it is chronological for the most part, but there's not really a huge narrative in that kind of sense, story driven like at all. And what I did at first, I was nervous, but I actually really liked it once I got going. The book is split. First, it's split into half, between the first half dealing with the Mediterranean geographic area during the medieval period, and then the North Sea during the medieval period, and it kind of just resets chronologically for each of those 2 geographic areas. But things are actually pretty different, all things considered, even like the different construction techniques and everything. So it actually did kind of make sense to kind of break it down. So like while we're reading about like Byzantine stuff, if they merged together, you'd have to also read about like the Vikings and the Norsemen at the same time, and it probably actually would have been a little bit jarring, a little bit kind of weird. But what I did like about this book is we are dealing with, especially like when you're dealing with the Mediterranean world, a lot of the Byzantine naval stuff is covered, which I thought was really interesting. I didn't know like a whole lot. And I love how we could went into like kind of the technological aspects and like Greek fire and things like that. And probably my favorite episode that I read about was actually the kind of thalassocracy-ish kind of thing kind of going on with Norman Sicily under Robert and Roger Guiscard. I didn't know a whole lot about it besides the fact that they conquered southern Italy and Sicily. But it was just really interesting how pivotal the Navy was for them in deflecting like enemies off each other and kind of being able to hit and run and kind of retreat and bide their time and stuff like that. I just found that really interesting. So like I said, if you want Byzantine, Norman, crusading history as far as like naval aspects, definitely check this out. And then like I said, the second half is dealing with a lot of Northmen, and then kind of during the 100 Years' War, different stuff between like the English and French, kind of what was going on there as far as like shipbuilding and the technologies and strategies employed there. So like I said, the only caveat here is if you love medieval history and you just want to be immersed in like especially the naval side of things, you'll probably do fine, but it is a lot. It is just a lot of information there. Next up, I have Francis and Joseph Guy's Women in the Middle Ages, the lives of real women in a vibrant age of transition. So I love their life in a medieval, let's see, they have castle, village, and city. I love those books, so I figure I might as well so I found this banged up like used copy of this one. I did enjoy this one, not as much as those ones, and I think part of it was I feel like the structure was almost kind of similar in the sense the first half is kind of dealing a lot with just kind of women's roles in society kind of in general, and then the second half is dealing with like different individual women throughout the medieval period and kind of like their like little vignettes and stuff, and I felt like some of them were just a lot stronger than others. I don't know. It was Margarita, what's her name? Dattini, is one that I found was like super, super interesting, but I felt like a lot of the other ones And it was kind of like, like it didn't really add much to the narrative compared to just like learning about women in general. But like I said, definitely still a good one. I know there's like 3 or 4 books on this topic. It's just Francis and Joseph Yee's. Like I said, everything else I've ever read by them is really good. So I think in general, most people will also like that one. And then for one that I listened to on audiobook, just because everyone on the Historathon Discord, for those who don't know, there's a giant history-based year-long reading event. I'll leave links to the creator and the other co-hosts down below in the Discord. But one that was popping up a little bit was The White Ship. Let's see, I had it written down because it's got a long subtitle. Conquest, Anarchy, and the Wrecking of Henry I Dreams by Charles Spencer. And as it says on the tin there, it's all about the White Ship incident. For those who don't know, I think, if I remember correctly, in 1120, Henry I, who was the son of William the Conqueror, so a lot of his children, his legitimate heir to the throne, as well as like a bunch of like half siblings and stuff, were on a ship crossing over the English Channel to the Norman holdings when it sunk, and everyone died. Everyone drowned except for I can't remember if it was like the butcher or some like a farm or a smith or something. I think it was a butcher or something along those lines. He was the only survivor, and what that kind of left was Henry I was already a little bit older. Just didn't. There's not really a plan like in place for like succession, and then when he dies. The anarchy kind of starts taking place right afterwards, largely because one of my favorite figures from medieval history, Matilda, the Empress Matilda. The English lords had basically sworn fealty to her, and Henry I's presidents basically say, I don't have a legitimate son, whatever, when I die, like Matilda's going to be in charge, and they're like, oh yeah, okay. Then when he dies, Matilda's like over across the channel, and her cousin Stephen of Blois was like, no, I'm just gonna like take the treasure and become king, and they're all like, yeah, we'd rather have like a guy. And then you have the anarchy and the Civil War and everything like that. So I did enjoy this book. I feel like this was a really good narrative. There was a lot of context leading up with William the Conqueror, his 4 sons, eventually leading to Henry I, and kind of like a little bit of his reign, then obviously a big detailed account of the White Ship incident, and then sort of the aftermath of, the succession crisis and everything like that leading up to the anarchy. So like I said, since I really enjoy learning about Matilda, it was kind of like this whole book was almost kind of like a big contextual setup for the anarchy and Matilda's endeavors to retake like the English throne and stuff. So I did like this one quite a bit. I would say like the writing wasn't anything like super spectacular, but it got the job done, and sometimes that's all you need when you're reading about a new event. All right, so there you have it. Those are the 3 honorable mentions. Let's get on to the 2 main events here. And the first one is one I listened to at the beginning of the year, and it is The Perfect Sword, and I have the subtitle here too as well, Forging the Dark Ages. Oh, I guess that one wasn't that long, by Paul Gething and Eduardo Albert. And this is all about the Bamberg sword. So, this sword was found at an archaeological excavation of a castle and that kind of thing in, I believe it was the 60s or early 70s. And the archaeologist in charge and whatever, due to a bunch of just different things, it got put in storage in a suitcase, literally in a suitcase. And people forgot about it for like 30-something years or whatever. And it wasn't until I think the early 2000s that one of the authors rediscovered it in the suitcase. And he kind of was like, researching it and kind of like doing some investigating with the sword. And it turns out this is like one of the best anglo-saxon early Middle Ages like weapons that that we have like today, as far as like the craftsmanship and everything. So the book is kind of detailing a lot of like just kind of about swords in general, but also about like the symbolism of the aristocracy. Arms and armor of the aristocracy and weapons and things during the 6th and 7th centuries in England. I think it was Northumbria. I think is where they kind of determined where the sword was likely from. Fortunately, the smith didn't like leave an engraving or anything of like the name like sometimes was done during this time period and everything. But they were able to kind of go through the different like pattern welding techniques and everything, and just like how advanced it was. But you learn all about like smithing. They try to recreate the sword using kind of techniques that they knew were around during that time period. So I thought that was like just really cool, kind of incorporating like the real world kind of like social aspects and stuff like that. So like it's not just a straight up history of this sword per se, but almost like a life and times of the sword. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense. I thought it was really well done. Anyone who enjoys like kind of just medieval weapons or swords in general, like definitely check this one out. Like I was kind of going into just because like it kind of just piqued my interest, like when I read the blurb about like rediscovering a sword, after it had already been discovered and stuff. But yeah, it just turned out to be just like a hidden gem there. I just really thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope you guys do as well. And then lastly, for the winner, and I'm kind of bending the rules probably a little bit, because the early portions of the book is definitely still kind of in the classical period, but we have Judith Herron's Ravenna, capital of Empire, crucible of Europe. And this is an entire sort of history of the late antiquity and the early Middle Ages. So it's roughly about 400 to like 850 or so. It's kind of the time period that this is included. So a little bit classical, like kind of the fall of Rome and everything. But definitely a lot of like kind of early Middle Ages as far as like kind of dealing with before the age of, it kind of ends with like the age of Charlemagne, for those kind of put it in context a little bit there. So definitely a lot of early Middle Ages stuff going on. But the lens through which everything's shown is the city of Ravenna, which is a city in northern Italy, which actually was temporarily the capital of the Roman Empire for a little while there. First of all, like there's tons of good plates. Ravenna is well known for its mosaics and stuff, but there's, if I could actually, known for its mosaics and architecture and everything, and you kind of go through all the stuff that was created during this like kind of early Middle Ages time period and everything. Probably the mosaic of Justinian and Theodora is probably the most famous one right there. You've probably seen that if you read a lot of history and stuff. That'll come across quite often. I just thought the author did an amazing job. Just like each big unit is kind of roughly like 2 generations or 50 years or so, kind of broken down, kind of with a main character, a big player like on the scene and everything. I just thought it was super well done. You'll learn tons. You'll learn a lot of the political, military, cultural stuff. Political military stuff. For example, like Heraclius's reconquest under Justinian, reconquest of Italy, which ended up with a lot of fighting around Ravenna and that kind of thing when they're during the Austro-Gothic Wars. But you deal with a lot of the kind of more of a social and cultural stuff. A lot of the the Christian theology, kind of you go into the weeds a little bit just because that was the thing during this time period, and some of the stuff kind of going on in Ravenna had a big aspect as well. But there were also just kind of like regular intellectuals. For example, the geographer of Ravenna I had never heard of before I read this book, and he actually had like this really giant map of like the known world and everything and wrote on it. So I thought that was just really cool. I highly recommend it. It's just a great blend of an awesome topic, awesome writing, and good information. So can't really go wrong there. So there you have it. Those were my 5 favorite medieval history books from 2024. If you read any medieval histories, let me know what your favorites were down below. Always on the lookout for good medieval histories and histories in general. So anyways, whether you're reading medieval history or not, always remember, read victoriously.